part of our series. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback. Hopefully you aren't. We're pleased to have with us as our first presenter, Ms. Jeannine Kunz, who's the Vice President of Tooling U-SME. Jeannine joined SME in August of 2000, supporting research and new product development. Today, again, as I said, serves as VP of Tooling U, leading provider of learning and development solutions for the manufacturing community. She has a variety of kudos coming through that you can read on the SME website. Hopefully, is that feedback? Am I only hearing it, or is everybody else? So I'll shorten my introduction. Additional to the Vice President's in her spare time, she's the chair of the NDIA Manufacturing Workforce Education Committee, and she'll be introducing us to SME Tooling U. So with no further ado, Jeannine, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Great. Can you see that, Gary? Can you confirm that?
Yes.
All right, great. Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for the introduction. So don't have to say a whole lot here. Certainly my involvement, and happy to be the chair of the Manufacturing Division's Workforce Committee. Spent 20 years in workforce training and development in SME. You probably know us as the Society of Manufacturing Engineers, heading up our learning and development area. I also participate in other Manufacturing USA institutes you might be familiar with, America Makes, and Additive, and also ARM in the area of robotics. So let's go ahead and kind of jump right in here. Starting with a little bit about SME, if you're not familiar with the organization. Essentially, we're a nonprofit organization, been around for almost nearly 90 years, servicing the manufacturing industry as a whole. So everything from small business to large businesses and a variety of different industries, certainly including the defense industry. And our sole purpose really is to advance the industry, to ensure that it's healthy and competitive, and it has the right tools and resources to be the best it can be. We kind of break that down into two areas. We really focus on the advancements of technology and the advancements of people. We feel like those two, when they're in sync, we're at our best. And we do the technology side more through bringing awareness to technology that is being advanced, whether it's materials, equipment, technologies. We do those through our shows, through our magazines, our publications. And then on the people side, we do things from pipeline development, with scholarships, grants that go to schools to help develop their programs, as well as what you're going to hear quite a bit from me is more on the training education side. So kind of jumping into that, and Gary already gave a little bit of information, which is, about what we do. And essentially, we're really trying to help organizations and schools all in the area of learning, training, education. And we really do that through a variety of different ways, but we are very much focused on customizing our solutions to best meet the very particular needs that we know are very diverse in the industry. You'll hear me talk a little bit about this throughout. Obviously, I'm a little biased towards workforce, but we believe that having a competitive workforce, having a strong strategy in workforce is a competitive advantage to a community, to a company, to a school, to an individual. So just a little bit of background more on us, just so you kind of know where some of maybe the insights and best practices that I plan to share here come from. As I mentioned, it's a diverse set of customers and experience that we have within SME. To give you an idea, this division of the organization has about 100 employees working with thousands of companies, from the smallest employers to the largest manufacturing employers that certainly have a global footprint here based in the United States, though. And you can see on that slide, the ones to the left, I'll call it our primary industries that we work with, so a pretty wide range there. But certainly on the other side, we also do things like food processing and plastics and chemical. But our predominant one is more discrete manufacturing, aerospace, automotive, oil and gas, heavy equipment, things like that. And, the thing that we find important is not just supporting the industrial base, but supporting schools. So a lot of our education Our curriculum gets utilized in community colleges, high schools, universities. And all that really rounds into what gives us a little bit of insight, or a lot of insight into what we see, right? Kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And there's a little bit of all of that, right? And just like it is with any industry. But so it's a little bit about who we serve, where we serve, and then a little bit about what we're actually doing and the kind of content, just again to give you a little bit of that background in color and context. Is we offer content in a variety of different areas. So our curriculum, irrespective of the delivery of that curriculum, is in a wide range of topics. Because as you imagine, SME being a broad-based organization, we're broad-based in terms of who we serve, which basically requires quite a bit of a diverse set of offerings to serve that industry. So things from foundational to very production-oriented to engineering, Industry 4.0. We got to kind of have it all. So that's a little bit about our content. And then the way we deliver it is a very diverse mechanisms, right? We use all the kinds of tools that we can, certainly digital tools, but also face-to-face instruction. We're embarking on virtual reality in addition to our strong base that we have in online learning, books, videos, certification, etc. So that just gives you an idea, a little bit of what we do, who we do it for, and that really was meant to be to provide some color and context to where do these insights come from. So as I mentioned, our field of people who are out working hands in hand with the employers, the communities, state officials, or the employers, it really does give us that kind of insights into hopefully where we can do, just like we're doing today, to try to share some of those things. Or what I often find is spending time to hopefully shed light on the importance of investing in workforce. So we'll kind of go ahead and get into it. And certainly Gary has apprised me that he will be giving me any questions that happen to come throughout the session. But I will start with one of my favorite studies that Deloitte did, because I felt a little bit like a kid at Christmas, you know, getting my favorite gift, because I'm very focused on people and workforce as a competitive strategy for organizations. When Deloitte did a study to look at the number one indicator of a country's competitiveness, so this was kind of a worldwide view, and they looked at that, the number one indicator, as you can see on there, was access to talent. And I thought that was pretty significant. Of course, you know, being biased, I kind of felt like, yes, of course it's talent. But it was at a higher level of an indicator than the country's trade, its financial, its tax system, cost of labor, materials, et cetera. So it really put not just labor, but talent, right? There's a difference. You could have people, but if the people don't have the skills and the talent and the things and the knowledge required in that country or that company or that community to execute on where it needs to go, then it's still not just about having people. It's about having people have the right talent. And you can start to see where that could easily translate into a company, right? Or a community. It's not, but at this macro level, I thought it was really important to share as an onset of how it, you know, how it related to a world view from Deloitte. So if it's really important, right? It's a key attribute of a country's competitiveness or company. Then how are we doing here in the United States? And a lot of you know this, so I'm not going to belabor this, but you were obviously not doing so good in terms of our pipeline to fill jobs. We know that there is a large gap between the jobs that we need and the skills that we need. So it's not just, again, the people, it's the skills. And a study we did a couple years ago, and certainly would say that it still holds true. We had done one probably about 2011, shortly after the financial crisis, and then here in 2018. And while finding skilled labor, you know, that first, I should say, skilled new hires was one that was about 89% right after the skills crisis. You know, when you look at 99% in any kind of research, you guys know the standard deviation of margin of error, that's pretty much saying everybody. You know, everybody kind of said they had some level of issue with finding new talent. But the things that actually kind of popped up that were newer than they were back in shortly after the financial crisis was upskilling the incumbent worker and onboarding new employees. Onboarding new employees wasn't too surprising because we had been experiencing growth, obviously, prior to COVID. But the number 2 item on there, upskilling incoming workers, we surmise, based on our experience and some of the, looking into the different levels of research that we did, was that had a lot to do with the technology advancement that's been happening here in the last decade as well. So you started to see, not only are they trying to find the talent to come in the door, they're finding that their existing talent is starting to have a gap between what's needed to advance the company and what the skills are. So again, probably not a huge surprise, but again, this is where we say we have these workforce challenges. And I'd say, having been in the organization for 20 years and spending time in this is a really difficult time. It's a really good thing that we have all this great technology in front of us to harness and new things that are on the horizon, certainly. But when you combine transitioning to Industry 4.0 and the pressure on doing that inside of a company, in addition to what was already a challenge around workforce, we have a pretty interesting situation, and not in a good way, right? Now, I'd like to look at it as an interesting opportunity when you harness both of those things. But when we did some additional research and asking people around this Industry 4.0, how are you doing in terms of implementing technology? And essentially, those that were having challenges implementing technology, you could see that it's pretty high percentages on a lot of those different key technologies that we hear about. So we know that they're having challenges with people. We know that they're having challenges with adopting technology. And I like to put this image up, which basically says, makes people probably feel a little out of control, right? It makes us feel a little chaotic. And what I can do, again, is qualitative tell you that working with what would surprise some of you is the small to mid-sized manufacturers, albeit absolutely true, do not have the kinds of resources that the large manufacturers do. But surprisingly, even those large manufacturers feel very challenged themselves. So it's not as if we've all cracked the code just because you have maybe a larger staff or larger resources equals a good talent strategy or no workforce issues. The reality is we're all in it. We just have various levels of degree in that challenge and kind of trying to harness and get a plan going forward. So if we kind of go on and say, what is it all starting to translate into? I think that we would all say, that old saying, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, we all know, right? Is the definition of insanity. But it really is kind of our number one competitor. It's trying to break ourselves out of the hamster wheel that we're in, which I will say, as I talk to manufacturers at many different events and have the opportunity, I'm certainly not, I'm sympathetic to the fact that at the end of the day, the manufacturer has a whole set of challenges in just trying to meet customer demand, quality, rate, productivity, safety, major things that are going on. And the people side kind of sometimes can easily get lost in all that. So sharing some additional stats around the people side. So maybe this will make you feel better depending on how your organization is looking on these things right now. But 3/4 of the companies say they don't have a talent development strategy. So again, if we go back to that Deloitte study and we say, we know this is important. We know that we know it's a problem too. We know we need people. And we know that it's the competitive differentiator for us. So we'd like to think we know this. A lot of companies don't have it. So, 3/4 of the companies don't have a plan around that. 2 out of 5 acknowledge their company trains people to develop the right skills. So, a little bit of goodness there. 38% agree their company provides employees with training that meets the organization's needs today. So again, not bad there, but still 60% that don't feel that way. But I think one of the key here is on the bottom one, right, is the needs for the future. Most don't feel that they've really kind of been able to get in front of things and kind of really look at what's needed going forward. And going back to that Industry 4.0 movement, knowing that we're shepherding in new technologies, and COVID has really pushed, right, as we know, with our supply chain and the digital thread and all those things, cybersecurity has really pushed us to know that we need to kind of get ahead on that. Those are some of the numbers that we saw. Probably that's about 18 months to 2 years ago. But then, the thing is, the good news is most of these things are in our control, right? So when we talk about the kinds of things that we're budgeting, and only 1/3 are budgeting for employee development, 1/3 are designating people to manage the training and development. About 1/3, again, are structuring their training programs for manufacturing. And about half of the companies evaluate critical jobs with structured evaluation. So these are things that are in our control. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what some others are doing and sharing some best practices. Hopefully, I've set the stage to make you feel that it's important to think about our workforce strategies, our talent strategies, the kind of competencies and skills we need in terms of going into the future. And I'm always trying to press the fact that people, and this is not for the faint of heart type of work, right? It takes a lot of time to create a workforce development strategy that aligns to your business strategy, but it's an equal and important part of the business strategy. And so I always tell people, just even taking steps to act now is better than doing nothing. So we talked a little bit about the job roles evolving, the retiring workforce we know is an issue, the generational shifts, all the different generations that are now in our workforce, and that rapid technology that's changing the landscape. So how do we train workers to this higher performance level to meet the needs of our business? Again, we believe, I like to share this chart because, again, even at SME, our board of directors they represent manufacturers. Some defense manufacturers. Our incoming president is from Lockheed Martin. Our current president is from General Motors. So we have a variety of their manufacturers. And what manufacturers love is technology, right? That's what we do best as manufacturers. And so, but it's about how do we keep our investments in people in the right context and the right type of parallel, if you will, to technology. And we believe that when those two are done, we can really create some innovation capacity within inside of organizations. So that brings us to then what do we recommend? When we talk with organizations, we paint the picture of what does world-class learning and development, those that are kind of doing this well, what does it look like? What are the kind of attributes? What you see on the slide, though, I don't want to be intimidating because we've worked with enough companies to know that they look at this and we start talking and it's almost like, okay, I've got major issues here in my organization, my plant. Maybe it's, the scrap, it might be whatever it is. And this becomes too much, right? So we always say to people, take a look at this, work through, thinking through what are good, strong attributes, and pick one that makes the most sense to your organization and at least start going down that road. I will tell you the one I have highlighted up in the front corner, you're going to hear me talk a little bit more about onboarding is important. So if people don't know which one to pick, I would say if you're hiring, make sure you have a strong onboarding program because you're going to hear me later talk about the cost of turnover, and that's a killer. That onboarding part, if not done well, can cost an organization a lot of money. And the new generations, right, really demand a lot more from companies as they get onboarded. So that's one. The other one we really talk about is job competencies or on-the-job training. So again, we'll touch on those, but the idea is at least for an organization to figure out what maybe makes sense for them, pick something, and try to move forward. Some just stats again to try to encourage those that maybe aren't converted yet to the need to focus on learning and development. There are studies from Burson and other organizations that really called high lows, high impact learning organizations. So those that do it well and really kind of meet a lot of those attributes, you can see here they're much better off in terms of first to market, productivity, meeting customer needs. Certainly that 58% more likely to have the skills to meet that future demand. And if you look back to our, if you remember the other slide, I said I think we're at 28% in terms of manufacturers responding to the survey about if they felt that they were set up for the future in terms of the skills. So you can see that differential that, if we start focusing on these things, we start to get ourselves better situated for the future. So one of the different attributes that was on there was competencies. And again, we talk a lot with organizations about, interestingly, sometimes, we've been talking about their machining operations and how advanced they are with the new 5-axes and the different things that they're trying to do. Maybe they're getting the hybrid machining, with additive. And when we talk to them, though, we look at we ask, well, do you have the defined skills of this job? Or what does the job description look like? And how does it align to your training and your career progression? And sometimes that job description and those things are very dated. They're 20 plus years old, right? So we often tell people, again, go into the process of really thinking through the competencies certainly needed today, ideally for the future, and start on those technical competencies required. That's my broad statement because I could give you a lot of the competencies that we hear about. Obviously, it ranges. There are some commonalities in certain things. But I thought I would put on the slide here the one that we hear obviously all the time. And it's outside of the technical aspects, it's the soft skills. And interestingly, a lot of these are becoming even more, they've been critical for a long time, but some of the discussions and what we're seeing is that these have become even more important because of the Industry 4.0, because of all the changes that trying to adopt technology and new ways of thinking. These soft skills are becoming very critical, and not just of the worker, but of the leader, right? The leader being able to paint the picture, to paint the vision around where they're going so people don't fear their job and they understand the connections between the changes in their work to their company's growth or meeting customer and market demand. Those things are all critical, certainly critical thinking and problem solving, innovation, curiosity. You could see where those tie in, right, to adopting new technologies and doing things differently. So we often tell people, again, if you can't spend the time on the technical, which we would not recommend, certainly trying to focus on these kinds of competencies are applicable to just about everybody. And you can get certainly some good headway wins on using some of that thinking in terms of your development of your people. So I'm going to use just a case study here. This is actually a pretty large one because it dealt with about 5,000 people at one of the largest auto manufacturers. And but it was taking about, I'm going to say we were working with about 30 different, these were skilled labor jobs in 30 different job classifications. And they were trying to take those 30 different classifications and build them down into 3: mechanical, electrical, and tool and die. And really it was an exercise to kind of create, if you picture a more robust body of knowledge around those 3 new classifications and mapping in those 28 different job roles to a more robust classification. That could be a scary situation. Obviously working with a lot of people have been done a different way for a long time, but if done methodically back to communication and buy-in. In this case, we worked with the union leaders, we worked with the individuals to kind of help create the program hand in hand with the leadership, the HR area, the union, and then basically created what that new body of knowledge looked like. And then everyone had to kind of take, whether they were a pipe fitter or whatever their role was, whatever they were mapped into, they were then taking an assessment against that new body of knowledge, those new competencies that they needed. And each individual in those 5,000 were given their particular roadmap based on how they were assessed against that new body of knowledge. So those new competencies for the new role were defined. Here I am in my old job, maybe with my old competencies. I get assessed, and based on how I performed to that new body of knowledge, those new competencies, a clear roadmap of training was outlined for me, both in instructor-led, on the job, and some online classes. So in that case, the results were very good. We had some good buy-in. We had a lot of a new agility in the group. Certainly the new classifications were much more agile for the organization, more efficient, more productive, and what they were able to save in gains in that regards. And so we had, basically a successful consolidation of about 5,000 trades from about 30 different classifications into 3. So competencies could be a very important part of helping take you from where you were to where you need to go. And obviously that differs depending on the situation. Another best practice is really around on-the-job training. And this one has become very, very important for 2 reasons. One, because people are hiring and onboarding and what the millennials and younger generations expect, but also because so much tribal knowledge is going out the door with that retirement workforce. It's a very significant issue. We'll have, there's a manufacturing aerospace industry that said, about 55% of their machinists were going to be gone here in the next couple of years based on retirement. So unfortunately, I'll say what the negative is we see all too often a lack of structured on-the-job training, call it transfer knowledge, right? Building of the new generation, onboarding the new individual. And it's a little bit like follow Jeannine around. She's going to kind of show you it's not very structured. It's not very clear how Jeannine does it, things different than how Joe does it. And what happens is we end up finding ourselves with a pretty big gap. And so that person walks out, the other person really doesn't know, the company's not sure. And so this is one that we definitely recommend, again, as is probably a best practice, is to really ensure that we have standardized OJT. Obviously having that standardization, validating the worker's skills, training the trainer. So, you know, the person that you put in this situation, all too often, we hear from that person, maybe was the top machinist, and he or she will say to us, well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing, right? I don't know how to train people. I'm not a very good communicator. So we can't just look at whether they have the skills and the actual art and craft of their job. We have to make sure that they know how to transfer that knowledge. And that's upon us as an organization to help build their skill in that, right? So now they have the technical skills, but they have the skills to train, and it is in a way that it's structured, and is it in a way that we can validate it? Because that's important too, that did I actually understand what Joe just taught me? Can I perform it? And so we can do that, but we give at least some tools, and we actually, later I put in here, but we have lots of these kinds of white papers and different things to kind of walk people through different steps on how to do that, to at least kind of get yourself rolling if you don't already have that expertise. A case study around here was we were working with an organization that had about a 6-month process of shadowing prior to their ability to make their first quality part, right? So the organization recognized that this was not sufficient, and we were able to go in, team up with that experienced person who knew what they were doing, but really didn't translate. And sometimes what they thought was an insignificant step, we realized, no, we got to document that. We got to kind of capture that and really pull from the person, because again, as we all know, we've done something for 20, 30 years. We just start to kind of think of it as common, right? But we have a hard time breaking that down. And so really getting someone attached to your expert and transferring that so that we can get into the hands of the new person coming in is a critical step. So we're able to develop structured standards, leader guides, student guides, performance board, and the results of that were what was a 6-month process of unstructured OJT. We were able to save 5 months from that time. And the person, so you can see the benefits, not only from clearly time saving, the financial side, but the new employee side, right? And then your veteran employee who has all the skills freed up too. So a lot of obvious things. Now in this case, this was a great result and a really good example, but even a month saving of time is significant in a manufacturing operation. So capturing the best practices, those standardized tools, training the trainer, like I mentioned, having a clear progression. How does someone go from here to there? That evaluation, that validation, that's an important measurement side. And overall, just showcasing, obviously what comes out of that is really demonstrating that you have a learning culture and a management commitment to your people. Kind of rounding some stuff out here as we'll make sure it gives time because I know we have another presenter, is I thought it would be important to share, and most of you know this because we hear it from tons of manufacturers, is this idea of retention, right? It's not just attracting talent, it's retaining the talent. And it's a challenge. And the Work Institute does a nice study, and it's probably not surprising to you, but 40% of all turnover, and this is global, so this wasn't actually in particular to manufacturing, but manufacturing could be worse. 40% of all turnover within the first year. That's significant. That's a significant statistic when we think about the cost of it, right? So again, sometimes what we see and we hear, what we hear from those that might be frontline managers, maybe it's a plant manager, maybe it's the head of engineering, who's telling us they're trying to convince somebody else of the importance of the investment. And a lot of times we've even helped people try to craft what the ROI looks like, because the ROI isn't just that you completed the training. That's not really the right metric, right? It's about what was the business impact? Were you able to, reduce your scrap? Were you able to have your production time, improve? Were you able to, whatever those things are? But certainly there's a hardcore cost that also could be discussed, which is just the cost of hiring, training, right, recruiting, all of those things. So this certainly gives a little bit of an insight, but most companies don't track the temporary labor that they had to hire while they had an unfilled position. They mostly just track, well, it cost us this maybe in advertising or our HR time, or maybe they had to hire a search firm. Those are obvious ones, but there's a lot more, as you can see on the slide, that could be attached to the cost of turnover that is easily identifiable in most organizations. So we know all these things are happening. And so we talk about retention, we talk about attraction, we talk about the talent gap. And, I think most organizations, I almost love, one of my favorite webinars to attend is all about the different generations, because there's nothing worth funny and entertaining, right? To make fun of your own generation, your parents' generation, your children's generation, right? But the reality is we have a very multi-generational, diverse workforce right now, and that's a good thing. But it has also exacerbated some of the challenges for organizations because we operate differently depending on our generation. And so when we talk about best practices in attracting and retaining, again, that going back to that structured on the job training and onboarding, not only was it good just in general, but as I mentioned, it's really good with those upcoming new generations because they kind of expected, they have a little bit, I'll say my generation was a little bit more like, suck it up, buttercup, make your, get through it, do your thing. And it's, I think, how we were kind of raised in our generation. But that's not the case. And so, but that's not a bad thing, right? Because I think we'd all say that it is good to have structured onboarding and training. Building those career pathways, young people want to know where they can go and they want to understand, what do I need to do to get here? I understand most of them sometimes say, what do I need to do to get the CEO job? And it's like day 2 and you're kind of like, well, a little bit of things you need to do, but that's okay. They want career progression. So let's make sure they know how to get there. What are the steps? What do they need to do? What do they need to learn? That needs to be clear for this generation. Communicating your company vision and mission is definitely critical. I think a lot of you have heard that. They're very much about the why do you exist? What does this mean? What kind of impact are you having on society? So we as manufacturers aren't always celebrating the amazing things we do. So that one kind of gets lost sometimes. So I think that's an important one. The second to last one is another one is regular feedback. These generations of the younger generations really need regular feedback. And again, it's a little bit different than some of the older generations. But I try to explain it. It's like social media, right? Everything's about how many likes they get. And they're used to these like immediate kind of reactions that they get from an audience, or they're gaming, right? And they've got these reactions from things instantaneously. Where, again, I'll say my generation isn't necessarily wired that way. The last note on there I thought you might find interesting is we did a study through our media publication, Smart Manufacturing Magazine, if you're familiar with it. And it reported those that were had given themselves high marks for implementing smart, so digital additives, some of the things that they can, were defined as smart in this particular research. 60% of those implementing smart reported an increased ability to detect younger generations. And that's probably not a surprise, but I thought it was an important note. So you can start to see where all these things weave together in terms of an organizational strategy, growth, and how people and talent and technology can all weave together. So a couple little fun facts around learning leaders preparing for Gen Z, those that are born after, 1997 to 2012. 98% of Gen Z learning preferences will differ from previous generations. No surprise. It's why we're kind of coming out with virtual reality, augmented reality, things like that. And 74% plan to make changes to their L&D to accommodate Gen Z workers. And we're seeing that with, again, some of our customers. And 84% are confident they know what Gen Z will need, which was good. That was actually coming out of a LinkedIn Learning blog, Gen Z is shaping the era of learning. One thing we've also, I thought I'd share as part of a study we did, again, different than after the financial crisis. I wouldn't say there was as much demonstration by companies working directly with schools, doing something to get involved, whether that's manufacturing day, sitting on advisory boards for this local school, maybe contributing talent, opening up their doors, internships, all those things. We saw a nice heavy lift in what I call corporate engagement, between the corporate engagement with educators, which was really good to see. So I would say it'd give us really good marks as an industry for stepping up, saying, you know what, this is an important part of my supply chain. So I know at NDIA, we've got, it's about education supply chain. And I would say your number one supplier, I think, is that of your people, right? It's like most important. Now, that doesn't mean the students are parts, but we should be, if we're getting bad parts, and if our students don't have what they need coming out of our education system, we need to communicate that. We as companies or industry organizations need to help the educators understand what is needed, what are the specifications from what they're building, and ensure that it meets the needs of the industry. We know we have a gap there, but it takes both parties coming together. So wanted to share a little bit of that. And kind of in closing, in the end, there's a lot there, I know, and there's a lot when it comes to those attributes of world-class learning and development organizations. So in the end, one feedback I always say to people is do something, right? Something's better than nothing. Learn from it, grow, evolve, try to track some metrics beyond just that you did the training, try to demonstrate some business impact from it to kind of get the momentum in your organization from a cultural momentum, but also a business momentum in the organization. And so for employers, certainly identifying your business objectives and aligning your workforce strategy to those business objectives by defining the competencies, and then looking to how that, learning is leading those competency development. Talked about the structured OJT, and make sure that it's all measurable. As far as educators, government, nonprofits like us, keep it simple, collaborate, and be creative. We sometimes try to boil the ocean, but sometimes we just need to kind of jump in, keep it simple, and again, get some successes and move forward. I know it looks like this, though. I know it does, but I've been able to see some great successes of organizations who've taken those steps, gotten some wins, and got past what looks like this, and the clouds and the trees start to part, and the sun starts to come through, and the path starts to look clear. And I'll end with something that I like to use as an analogy is, it's almost like a doctor going to a doctor visit. I like to think that, going from a regular physical and I'm feeling fine. I'm just doing my annual physical because I'm supposed to, right? I'm supposed to go in and see the doctor. And I felt great. I walk in, I'm like, I'm feeling good today. Talk to the doctor, and the doctor starts to ask me questions. Says, how much water do you drink a day? And you're like, oh, how much do you exercise? How's your stress level, right? Are you eating your veggies? And before you know it, you walk out and feel a little bit like a train wreck. Like, I'm a mess. I need to get things under control. So I always like to have a little fun with it and say, ask yourself these kind of questions, right? Or ask, if you're in a certain role and you're not a decision maker, maybe ask your leader, maybe ask those that are making decisions how they would rate themselves against these kinds of things. Because I think what we find is once we're forced, just like in our physical, we're forced to face that we probably should be doing some preventative things to ensure a healthy life, right? Going forward, a long, healthy life. And the same thing is true for our organizations. We need to ask ourselves those tough questions because it's easy inside of manufacturing. Don't get me wrong, I know it is. I know I hear the woes and I know that they are true and real, but until we can get in front of this, we're not truly optimizing this wonderful set of industry new technologies set in front of us and all these young people who are coming in with the ability to kind of grow as talent and help our organizations move forward. So I mentioned on our website, you'll see a lot of different white papers that we try to do. We try to write blogs on things, just again, to get things out there, either get people thinking or hopefully taking action to give them case studies of how other people have done it. We try to do a lot of case studies. Our website has a ton of them. You can actually go by industry and go look under aerospace or defense and find some of those. And then, of course, always happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeannine. That was a great presentation. We have a couple questions. So you talked a little bit about capturing the tribal knowledge before it leaves, and you talked about building the communication skills of the outgoing employees. You also talked about standardized job instructions. Is there any digital solution or things that we can do quicker? So those things take time, and obviously we're behind the eight ball right now. So are there any digital solutions that you're aware of that people could take advantage of before these people leave the door?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting because we're definitely kind of studying and looking at some of those. We have where we've done, like you said, almost, I'll say, calling it, taking it from 20 years ago, trying to get it to like at least 5 years ago kind of technology use in terms of documenting some of that work and making it more what we call performance support, like available when you need it, how you need it, mobile devices, right? So it's almost like I've got the problem with my plumbing and it's like maybe basic and I'm YouTubing, right? I'm looking on how to solve it and getting quick access to, call it small problems, maybe troubleshooting. But kind of where we see some of this going to is in the augmented reality. Some of you may have seen this or maybe using it in your organization where someone's at their space and the standardized work becomes like a digital direction, right? Where it's showing them maybe on the part where they're supposed to drill or where they're supposed to do something or what's being looked at, and to almost have the actual instructions in a digital way right there when needed, either showing it on the part or in kind of that virtual reality where we actually can kind of see and access things on the fly. So that would be from the, I'll call the delivery side, Gary. And then in terms of the capturing side, I've seen things where people have certainly just try to even videotape, right, and try to really capture it in the essence, really following some around when they do their job and really documenting it and getting it in a form, the best form you can, to be as digital as you can and on demand as you can. But that's, I think, an excellent question. And so those that are asking it are kind of almost even further ahead of how do we even get this to be more on demand. And there's some good practices out there of people who are doing that, but I wouldn't say it's widespread.
Great, thank you. Second question. So you discussed best practices in retaining and recruiting. Obviously, the millennial population is sizable. But how do we, if you were queen for the day, to engage millennials to join the manufacturing job opportunities, what would a national program look like, in your view, from a manufacturing recruitment program?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually sit on I'm joined with, let's say, about like 20 different other CEOs from other associations, everything from, steel and construction, a lot of manufacturing. I'm representing SME in that case, even though I'm not our CEO, but because of my role. And we talk a lot about that. And I've often said, it's interesting to me, and I have a 15-year-old, is I think two things. I think we've underplayed what we do as manufacturers. I mean, we really have. And I was actually talking to someone in the Department of Defense about during COVID, and I said, how do we take, and I wasn't trying to sound opportunistic about it, how do we take this global, right, that became this view, everyone was hearing about like ventilators and the common person probably couldn't even correlate that to manufacturing, right? But how do we help and take those moments to understand that manufacturing is the one, right, that brings these things to life and solves those kind of challenges, because we haven't really done a good job about painting why we exist, what we do, the impact of our industry as a whole. When I say manufacturing right now, it is a defense audience, but as a whole. And so I think that's certainly part of it. But also I would say that I don't think the younger generations, if you think about this generation, like my daughter who's 15, they are the most, what's the word, accepting, right, of everything. If you think of all the different generations, we keep getting better at being more accepting of every kind of thing you can think of, whether it's, you know, the diverse workforce, all different kinds of topics. And so for them, I think the fact that the one thing we haven't tackled is almost the, I would say the perceptions and what's the word, the prejudices against jobs. We will look at prejudice against gender, against race, against religion. I mean, but we don't talk about the prejudice that exists in jobs, which is, I think, if we painted that picture to the youth, I think they would be pretty upset about that prejudice, right? Because how could we ever say that a job in manufacturing is less important, but yet I think the older generations maybe have some of that, but the younger generations, I almost think we could mobilize them, to be honest, to be part of championing that change. So I know it's a little bit of a long answer, but I think certainly branding our industry for what it is, I think we've all been busy doing our jobs and doing good things, but we don't spend the time thinking about the branding of what we do.
Thank you. So with that, thank you so much. Great presentation. Awesome.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll turn the stage over to Rachel Leslie, President of the Indiana NDIA Chapter, for introduction to our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Gary. And thank you to the previous speaker. That was a great presentation. And those that are interested in sharing that presentation, we will have that available on a YouTube channel later and shareable to your friends that might have some interest. So thank you again. Gary, it is my pleasure to introduce Brad Rohr. Brad is a longtime industry professional recognized in both the public sector and manufacturing industry for his expertise in talent development. As Chief Talent Programs Officer, Brad uses his experience to develop and direct programs that support secondary and post-secondary students, as well as adult workers across Indiana, to succeed in involving technological advanced industry sector. Brad joined Conexus Indiana after a 26-year career at Subaru of Indiana Automotive, Inc., starting with experience on the production assembly line. He held positions of increasing leadership up to his most recent role, leading human resources operation and serving as manufacturing liaison for more than 6,000 employees at the Lafayette, Indiana plant. He was instrumental in developing major programs to address talent needs at SIA. He is also a former member of the Indiana Governor's Workforce Cabinet. He holds a master's degree in business administration from Western Governors University, a bachelor's degree in management of human resources from Bellevue University, and an associate's degree in organizational leadership and supervision from Purdue University. So it is my pleasure, and I'm certainly grateful, to introduce Mr. Brad Rohr.
Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Yep, good.
We can hear you, Brad.
Brilliant, brilliant. So apologies for not having a full-on presentation. Obviously some last-minute changes with the lineup, but I do want to dovetail off of actually just the previous speaker and really talking about what's happening in the workforce space. So just as a quick overview, Conexus Indiana, for those that don't know, is a nonprofit in central Indiana. We are a statewide organization that represents manufacturing and logistics in the growth and innovation of that sector. Obviously, it's the largest GDP for Indiana, and it's very important to our economy and our workforce. I will say that the technologies that have been developed is definitely increasing, and we're seeing a lot of that through some great innovative Industry 4.0 grant processes that we're working with IEDC. We see that technology happening throughout the state, and we need to be preparing our workforce. I will kind of be the one to raise the red flag, and the panic button is hitting, and DEFCON 4 or whatever we are on workforce for Indiana. We really need to think about how we're adapting not only our current workforce, but how we're pulling into that pipeline. And majority of that pipeline is going to come out of our K-12 space. I mean, if you look at Indiana overall, we've been very flat in population with minimal growth over the last 10 years. Couple that with nationally having a birth rate of 1.77 compared to, you know, in 1960, we were almost at 4. So, you know, our population is the lowest it's been in over 30 years. And what that tells me as a workforce development professional is we cannot allow any person to go without a plan or without a vision. And we have to be guiding each and every person coming out of K-12 and entering into post-secondary or the workforce, guiding them into our paths, and either path being manufacturing and aerospace or defense or any other type of high wage, high demand job with economic mobility. That is going to be very important for us to sustain our growth as an organization, as a state. I'll let you know, 85,000 Hoosiers graduate every year, and roughly 25,000 or 30% leave without a plan. And that's a really waste of good talent and opportunity when we have that many leaving without a plan. And what that means is they're not enrolled in post-secondary, they're not enlisted in the military, and they're not employed. And we can't afford as a state and as an industry to let that continue to happen. We need to be focusing our development opportunities. So everything that we were talking about previously with incumbent workers and how to attract and retain, we really have to figure out how to crack that nut to guide some of these kids. And even down to the freshman and sophomore level, we still have anywhere from 10 to 15% of our kids not graduating high school. And that number for Indiana of people between the ages of 18 and 64 is 460,000 Hoosiers without a high school diploma. We can't afford to continue to let that happen as a state and as an industry. We have to continue to figure out how to get in there and really guide these students to better opportunities. I want to go back for a second to the previous presentation because turnover is a big issue. We've actually done some studies with our manufacturers and then with Ascend Indiana. It's about $9,000 per person for turnover, even if they're only there for a day. It's just the amount of work that is missed and lost time and everything else that you have to factor in. It's a significant amount of money to any industry or any company. So what we can do to try to change that opportunity or increase those students staying or those employees staying with the organization is going to be really important. Something that just came across my email yesterday and it just kind of timed with my phone call with Rachel. Indiana, we've had all this COVID situation, and pre-COVID, we were running 3%, in some counties less than that unemployment rate, with about a 64% participation rate. And 64% means, a good portion of our state, higher than national average, was engaged in the workforce. And I can tell you the numbers that I saw this morning, this month in September of 19 compared to September of 2020, that number has dropped by 50,000 people that are participating in the workforce. And knowing that we had about 85,000 open positions pre-COVID going into manufacturing in various stages, we can't afford to lose 50,000 people being engaged in our workforce right now. So that number is significant, and I'm fearful, as I think mentioned earlier, with a potential retirement wave, that's only going to increase. I think people have been able to take this period of quarantine and reduction in work to figure out how to be thrifty and maybe even retire early. In some cases, we right now, the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows us that about 36% of our manufacturing workforce will be eligible for retirement in 5 years. And currently, if you take everybody that's eligible right now, it's 25%. So that's a significant amount considering Indiana has almost 600,000 manufacturing employees throughout the state. But I want to kind of shift and focus on that secondary space one more time here and talk about the Gen Z. I know we've harped on or spoke a lot about millennials over the last several years. But for us, what we're trying to do is focus into that Gen Z space and really recruit them out of high school or the young adults that are currently in the workforce into that manufacturing space. But I can tell you, Gen Z is actually listed as the disconnected group. The younger adults are considered disconnected. Indiana is right now ranked 29th nationally for disconnected Gen Z. So about 10.8% of our Gen Zs are considered to be disconnected or not focused in employment. But interestingly enough, though, they feel that 24% of them feel that their career expectation is going to be $60,000 a year coming out of either high school or right out of post-secondary. So they have high expectations. So to your point earlier, I think they want to try to jump to CEO in a pretty short period of time, but they are definitely focused on getting good high technology skilled jobs. But I will say something that's interesting is, unlike millennials, 65% of the Gen Zs are focused financially or career advancement versus the work-life balance that we've seen previously. So a lot of them are really looking at that dollar amount, and then that, as mentioned earlier, those career advancement opportunities. You know, if you have a good recruiting pathway to show progression in someone's career, that's going to be a strong attractant to the Gen Z population. Something else that I found incredibly interesting is 52% feel that their technology, they have enough technology experience and are adapted and ready to enter a job that is highly technical. They feel that that is a strong strength of theirs, and obviously they've all had some type of computer or the world's knowledge in their hands since birth, but they really feel like technology is something inside their wheelhouse. However, as mentioned earlier, the soft skills are not there, and I actually have some really compelling data that tell us why. In 1968, 48% of our young adults between the ages of 15 and 18, those baby boomers, actually had employment of some sort in high school. So that's nearly, that's half of that population. If you move up to 2002, the millennials, that dropped down to 30%. So only 30% were active in the high school time frame inside type of some employment. Gen Z, that number is down to 19%. So, we want to know why the work ethic is not there, or why the communication skills are not there, or why they don't know the importance of showing up. I mean, the list of things that we question on the soft skills side is incredibly long, but it really shows us right in this data point that we've taken them out of the learning opportunity, which would be work, internship, even getting jobs after school, whatever it may be. That has shifted dramatically in the current generation, or the Gen Zs. So how do we fix that? And for those that are really involved with the state, the governor's workforce cabinet changed the grad pathways, or changed the secondary graduation to grad pathways. And our 2023 graduates, which are current sophomores, are required to have some type of work-based learning experience. And I encourage everyone on the phone and everybody in manufacturing to think about, how do they engage the secondary space to ensure that those work-based learning experiences, which are now required, are connected in manufacturing? How do we ensure that that happens? And they will have to seek it from some other place, healthcare, insurance, wherever it may be, which are all still good fields. But selfishly, as a manufacturer, I want that experience to be happening in that manufacturing space. So how do we make sure we're opening up our doors in such a way that brings a positive outcome and positive opportunity for those students to grow and still meet that demand? And then maybe give them some focus and an internship experience to offset some of this lack of experience in the workforce. I want to say, because I know I want to try to keep us on time here, and there may be some questions. They are highly adaptive, so I think we have to think positively about the generation that's coming out. 80% aspire to work somewhere with cutting edge technology. So they want to be somewhere that's innovative and highly technical. And I mean, I can't think of a better place than manufacturing for that type of mindset. And 91% of them say that technology is going to influence their job choice. So if they have two employers and one is a lot more technical than the other, they're going to choose that highly technical position 91% of the time. And 80% believe that technology and automation creates equity. So they think that basically they'll seek economic mobility by going into technical types of jobs or roles. And I think we all know that. I mean, the average wage in manufacturing in Indiana is over $77,000. So that would stand to reason that the more experience and more technology that comes out, the more wages that would be part of that growth. So I really just, for me as a workforce person, and particularly somebody that focuses on secondary education, we have to do the best we can, either manufacturing days or internship experiences, or just overall communication. We have a communication plan that will be released in 2021 that is trying to raise awareness of manufacturing in our state, and not only to the parents and other influencers, but particularly to that generation. We're trying to align their values so they can see how they match and line up with manufacturing. You know, take the behaviors and traits that they feel that are very important to them and draw that direct connection to the jobs that we have available, and really make them aware. Secondary education is somewhat limited on their ability to do so. I mean, our state right now has a counselor to student ratio of 600 to 1. You know, 600 students every one counselor. And for those that understand some of the social issues happening in our current society, I'm going to guess counselors don't have a whole lot of time to talk about careers to our students. So really, it's going to be our responsibility as employers to make sure we're in there doing that work and encouraging these students to drive to the future of manufacturing in our state. So I hopefully, again, apologize for not having a presentation, and I'm happy to share, Rachel, all these stats that I just talked about with you, and you can share with the group. But if anybody's got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Brad. And I do very much appreciate that you were able to fill in due to COVID-19. It's been interesting navigating some of the speakers, so I do appreciate it. We do have one question here. So in regards to scholarships and overall educational funding, do you think that the help or assistance for the students considering this pathway is keeping up with the current need?
Yeah, so there are opportunities. I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but with this grad pathway change, Earn Indiana dollars are now eligible for secondary students. So companies can also look at that to help support the wages for some of those interns. And then, you know, we're trying to do as much as we can with scholarship opportunities for students to get into some type of internship experience in the summer with a manufacturer, or even a scholarship going into secondary education.
Thank you, Brad. Jeannine, did you want to answer that as well?
Oh, I was just trying to unmute myself. Yes, thanks. Actually, I will share, in addition to the great things Brad talked about with Indiana, SME has an education foundation. I think we gave about $1.8 million last year in scholarships. So this is nationally based. The nice thing is you can go to the SME Education Foundation website and you just fill out one application, and basically that student is evaluated against a myriad of different scholarship opportunities, so that we can kind of look and see where they might, so they don't have to apply to this one through us. That's one positive thing. Some organizations like Ford or Honda or some different organizations have set up endowment and certain scholarships. They have certain criteria. So again, the student doesn't have to maybe wade through all those criteria. They just kind of apply, and then we're able to see where we can get them some funding. That's one comment. And another comment, because it might be of interest to Indiana and the community, is we have a program called PRIME. It's called Partnership Response in Manufacturing Education. It's run through our foundation. And essentially what it is, it's the companies coming to the table with funding to build a school. Back to what I mentioned, the supply chain. You know, it's kind of like, okay, company, you would work with a supplier, right? You kind of bore in and support your suppliers if they needed help, right? It's a partnership. So no different than that with a school. This is where companies, sometimes either one company or several companies in a community fund. They pick a school, or maybe in some cases we actually have a couple schools in a certain district, but most of the time it's one school that they look at, that they say, that school needs help, right? It's an important school to our community, to our companies. And while they understand their investment isn't just going to be one for one to that employer, they see it as all boats rise, right, by building the infrastructure. So they give the money. In this case, it's several hundreds of thousands of dollars that get into our foundation and then go back out where our foundation staff work then with the administration, the school, and figure out with the employers at the table, what are those needs? And then the funding goes towards what equipment's needed, curriculum, teacher training, professional development, a middle school camp. I mean, pretty much trying to build a program to meet the employer's needs. And so in that case, it's called Prime, and it's where the local employer, it doesn't happen though without local employer financial support. And then our team will go in and do the work, right, of kind of marry those two things together. And it's truly a partnership between the educator then and the employer.
Thank you both. Gary, do you see any other questions on your end?
I see one. So Brad, you mentioned 85,000 graduates with 25,000 with no plan. With the current environment, read COVID-19, do you see telecommute and how it affects manufacturing being a critical element? And how can we use the digital tools that are available to help grab that 35% who I imagine are gamers or understand computers and those kind of things, and how can we pull them back in using the digital tools that we have?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great point. There's a lot of things happening digitally. I can't even begin to list the different social media tools that can be used. The unfortunate part is a lot of those people that are coming out without a plan may be in areas that they don't have availability to Wi-Fi or internet. Indiana has struggled with some rural problems with that. And then also you've got some people that are on free and reduced lunch and other issues where they can't have access to it. So it's definitely difficult. I would say that we need to continue to do our work to push and offer virtual tours. Manufacturing Day, I know a lot of companies did that this year. Really just the opportunity to connect with those students by talking to K-12 and saying, can we do a virtual presentation for your classroom? Or is there a way to log in? There's a lot of teachers looking for content and looking for assistance, and that's an easy way to make that happen. I'll throw in one more interesting part. 25,000 of those students come out without a plan. I don't know if many people know this, but 10,000 of the freshmen of post-secondary drop out every year. So you've got about 35,000 that are kind of wandering around. So there's so many things that we need to do as a state, and digital, I think, is a good way to do it, but also just continuing to have those opportunities to interact with those students in any organization that may be allowing it. So.
Great. Thank you, Brad. Well, I don't see any other questions on my end. Gary, I'm going to ask you one more time just to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Nope, we're clear.
Okay, Brad or Jeannine, is there anything else that you would like to add to the discussion before we close out?
No, other than thank you. Appreciate the time.
I'd say the same thing. Appreciate it.
Jeannine, we appreciate you. Brad, we also appreciate you. This is the last seminar as part of our three-part series. And I want to especially thank Gary Flegel for his leadership and everything that he does on the manufacturing side for the state of Indiana and for NDIA. With that being said, I would like to invite everybody on this call and or webinar to participate in the upcoming NDIA event or meeting that we have. If you go to our website, www.ndiaindiana.com, you can actually register for the upcoming events. That particular event's happening on November 9th. So I look forward to hopefully getting to see each of you speakers again, and also everyone on the line to participate in the future. Gary, is there anything that you would like to add, sir?
No, I just want to thank you, Rachel, and for the partnership, and look forward to continuing our collaboration between the Indiana NDIA chapter, the NDIA Manufacturing Division, NCDMM, all are great participants, and I think the future's looking great.
Okay, everyone, we will have this out for you to share with your people and your colleagues. So we look forward to it again. Have a wonderful afternoon.